They're all gathered at the Christmas table, toasting without me. My name isn't even in the family group chat anymore. But what they don't know is, every phone in that room runs on the plan I control. And I just cut it off. Sheridan, my sister, clinks her glass and laughs, holding up her shiny engagement ring like she invented love. My parents beam like she cured cancer. Brant, my brother, mumbles something about real family values. Meanwhile, I'm standing outside their snowy suburban mansion, staring at my phone screen. One swipe, one click. Their perfect holiday? Disconnected. Power dynamic. I'm the cast-off nobody. They're the golden family who kicked me out. Secret weapon. I own the damn plan. They don't even realize it yet. The A to Z promise. I went from being the family's invisible errand girl to the woman who owns the tech company that powers their lives, and tonight, they're about to find out just how useless they are without me. The oppressive cheer of my family's Christmas dinner was a physical force, pressing in on me from all sides. I was 29 years old, yet I was seated at the kids' table. It wasn't a joke, not a funny little tradition. It was a statement. The main dining table, a grand mahogany affair my father had inherited, was laden with gleaming silverware and crystal glasses. It was reserved for the people who mattered. My parents, Donna and Vance, sat at either end, glowing with a proprietary pride. My sister, Sheridan, the golden child, was seated to my mother's right, her hand strategically placed on the table, so the diamond on her finger caught the light of the chandelier. Her fiancé, Cooper, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, sat beside her. My brother, Brant, and his wife, Jenna, sat opposite them. Jenna, as usual, looked trapped, her gaze fixed on her plate, as if it held the secrets to the universe. And then there was me, relegated to a rickety card table with my two young nieces, who were more interested in flicking mashed potatoes at each other than engaging in conversation. The chair was too small, my knees bumping uncomfortably against the underside of the table. I felt like a giant in a dollhouse, conspicuous and out of place. The linen on the main table was starched white. Ours was a paper tablecloth with cartoon reindeer. The murmur of adult conversation drifted over, punctuated by loud, self-satisfied laughter. I tried to focus on my food, to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible, but then Sheridan stood up, tapping her glass with a fork. The room fell silent. "Cooper and I have an announcement," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. She held up her left hand, the diamond flashing like a weapon. "We're getting married." A chorus of oohs and ahs erupted from the main table. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. My father stood up and proposed a toast. "To Sheridan and Cooper. To a future as bright as you two are." Glasses clinked. I raised my plastic cup of water in a silent, futile gesture. No one noticed. I wanted to say something, anything, to offer a genuine congratulations, to feel like part of the moment. I cleared my throat, waiting for a lull in the conversation. "That's wonderful news, Sheridan," I began, my voice sounding thin and reedy in the suddenly quiet room. "I'm so happy for you both." Sheridan turned to me, her perfectly plucked eyebrows raised in mild surprise, as if a piece of furniture had just spoken. "Oh, Kala, sweetie," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "That's nice. Let the adults talk now, okay?" Brant snickered into his wine glass. My mother gave a tight little smile that didn't reach her eyes, a silent command to know my place. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I looked over at Jenna, hoping for a flicker of solidarity, but she was studiously avoiding my gaze, her focus entirely on cutting her green beans into microscopic pieces. I shrank back into my tiny chair, the silence from the main table a louder condemnation than any words. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of humiliation. I was an afterthought, a ghost at their feast. Later that evening, after escaping the suffocating atmosphere of the house, I was scrolling through my phone in the quiet of my own small apartment. A notification popped up from our family group chat. It was a picture of Sheridan's ring, a close-up, with the caption, "Officially official, so excited to plan the wedding with my amazing family." Dozens of hearts and congratulatory messages flooded the screen. I went to add my own, A simple congratulatory messages flooded the screen. I went to add my own. A simple congratulatory messages flooded the screen. But my thumb hovered over the keyboard. I felt a strange sense of dread. I tapped the info button at the top of the chat. The list of participants appeared. Mom, Dad, Brant, Sheridan, Cooper, Jenna. My name wasn't there. I scrolled up and down, my heart starting to pound in my chest. They had removed me. There was no notification, no explanation. I was just gone. A cold, empty space where my name used to be. The excuse, I knew, would be something like, "Oh, you never reply anyway. We didn't think you'd notice." It was a lie. I was always the first to reply to requests for tech help, the first to answer questions about which streaming service to use. But for the fun stuff, for the family stuff, I was muted. I was disposable. The next morning, the final insult arrived. An email notification from the phone company. "Your bill is ready." I clicked on it, my stomach churning. The total was $412. For the Huxley Family Unlimited plan, it listed 5 lines. Mom, Dad, Brant, Sheridan, and a new one for Cooper. All of them, with unlimited data, international calling, the premium package, and at the top, under account holder, was my name, Kala Huxley. I was the one who set it up years ago, the one who found the best deal, the one whose credit card was automatically charged every single month. They had kicked me out of the family conversation, but they were more than happy to let me keep paying for their ability to have it. No one ever said thank you. No one ever offered to chip in. It was just another one of Kala's responsibilities, like taking out the trash or fixing the Wi-Fi. As I stared at the bill, at the names of the people who had made me feel so small and worthless just hours before, something inside me didn't just shift, it broke. A cold, quiet resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. They had muted me, they had removed me, but they had forgotten one very important detail. I was still the one holding the switch. My world was a 400-square-foot basement apartment, a stark contrast to the sprawling suburban mansion my family called home. The air down here was always a little damp, carrying the scent of old concrete, solder, and the faint, ever-present hum of my server rack. This was my office, my bedroom, my entire life, crammed into one subterranean space. A single high window looked out onto the muddy boots of people walking by on the sidewalk, their lives happening a world away from mine. My desk, a slab of reclaimed wood I'd refinished myself, was a chaotic ecosystem of tangled cables, disassembled laptops, and monitors displaying lines of code. This was where I played with gadgets, as my family so dismissively put it. In reality, I was a freelance tech support specialist and a systems administrator for a handful of small businesses that couldn't afford their own IT department. I troubleshot network failures at 3 in the morning. I built custom software solutions. I kept the digital heart of their companies beating. It was complex, demanding work, and I was good at it. But to my family, it was a hobby, a failure to launch into a real career. I remembered the sting of my brother Brant's words from a few months back. I'd made the mistake of mentioning a particularly challenging project, a data migration for a small accounting firm. He'd scoffed, leaning back in one of my father's plush leather armchairs. "Still playing with your little gadgets in the dungeon, Kala?" he'd said, a smirk playing on his lips. "When are you going to get a proper job? You know, one with a corner office, not a concrete corner." The memory made my hands clench. He managed a regional branch of a mid-level insurance company, a job he'd gotten through one of our dad's golf buddies. He saw success in terms of titles and square footage, not skill or innovation. The irony was that his real job was laughably inefficient, a mess of outdated software and redundant paperwork. Years ago, when I was still naive enough to think they valued my expertise, I had offered to help. My father Vance was constantly complaining about the antiquated inventory system at his small manufacturing business. It was a paper-based nightmare that cost him thousands each year in lost time and errors. "Dad," I'd said, spreading out a detailed proposal on the kitchen table, "I can build you a custom automated system. It would streamline everything, track your inventory in real time, handle your invoicing. It would save you a fortune." He and Brant had looked at my diagrams, my carefully researched projections, and then they had looked at each other, and they laughed. Not a little chuckle, but a full-throated, patronizing laugh. "Oh, Kala," my dad had said, patting my hand. "That's very sweet of you, but let's leave the real business to the businessmen, shall we? This is a bit out of your league." I had never felt so small. They saw me as the quirky tech girl, good for fixing their iPhones or resetting the Wi-Fi router, but utterly incapable of contributing anything of real value. My contribution, in their eyes, was invisible, and nowhere was that more apparent than with the family phone plan. I had set it up in my early 20s, fresh out of a tech program, and eager to use my skills to help the family. I'd spent days researching carriers, comparing data packages, and negotiating a corporate discount through a contact I'd made. I found a fantastic deal, one that would give them all premium service for a fraction of the standard cost. It was a kind gesture, a gift from me to them. I put the account in my name because I was the only one who understood the technical back-end, and I set up the auto-pay from my bank account, initially intending for everyone to just send me their share each month. The first month, no one sent anything. When I gently reminded them, my mother had waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't worry about it, honey. It can be your contribution." And just like that, my gift became my obligation. For years, I had been paying for the digital lifeblood of a family that saw me as a charity case. They texted, they browsed, they posted photos from their fancy vacations and exclusive dinners, all on my dime. They never questioned where the signal came from. They just assumed it was free, like the air they breathed. They lived in their sun-drenched mansion, filled with expensive furniture and meaningless status symbols, while I lived in a basement, quietly, invisibly, paying for it all. But from my concrete corner, I could see the cracks in their foundation, and I was the only one who knew how to bring the whole house down. The screen of my phone was a black mirror, reflecting my own hollow-eyed face. I kept reopening the messaging app. A masochistic ritual, swiping to the group chat that was no longer there. It felt like a digital amputation. A part of me, however small and ignored, had been cleanly, silently severed. I stumbled into my small, windowless bathroom and leaned against the cold tile wall, sinking to the floor. The tears came then, hot and silent at first, then racking my body in great shuddering sobs. It wasn't just about the group chat. It was about the lifetime of tiny cuts that had led to this moment. The slow, methodical bleeding of my self-worth, drop by painful drop. I curled into a ball, my forehead pressed against my knees, and the shame spiral began. Flashbacks flickered behind my closed eyelids, like a badly edited home movie. I was 8 years old, sitting on the floor of the garage, carefully disassembling an old radio my dad was throwing out. I wanted to see how it worked, to understand the magic of voices traveling through the air. Sheridan had walked in, her friends trailing behind her like a royal court. "Ew, look at Kala," she'd sneered. "She's so weird, playing with trash." Her friends had giggled, and I had felt a hot blush of shame, hiding the delicate circuits and wires behind my back, as if they were something dirty. The memory shifted. I was in high school, at a parent-teacher conference. My physics teacher was gushing to my parents. "Kala has a real gift," he'd said. "A truly analytical mind. She sees systems where others just see chaos." My mother had smiled politely, but later in the car she'd sighed. "I just wish you were more social, dear. All that thinking can be very isolating. Why can't you be more like Sheridan?" Sheridan, who had been elected prom queen, and whose greatest accomplishment was being popular. My gift was seen as a social handicap, something to be managed, not celebrated. I was quiet, intense, cheap for saving my money for computer parts instead of designer jeans. The labels stuck to me like tar, but the deepest cut, the one that still ached with a phantom pain, was my college dropout moment. I had been in a prestigious computer science program, but I felt suffocated by the rigid theoretical curriculum. I was learning more on my own, building things, solving real-world problems. I tried to explain this to my parents when I told them I was leaving to start working freelance. My father had just shaken his head in disappointment. My mother's words, however, were the ones that had echoed in my head for years. She'd looked at me, not with anger, but with a profound, soul-crushing pity. "Kala, "You'll never make it without a degree," she had said, her voice soft and final. "You're making a huge mistake." In that moment, a part of me had believed her. For years, I had carried her verdict like a sentence, living down to her expectations. I stayed in my basement, kept my head down, and accepted their narrative of me as the weird, quiet failure, crying on the bathroom floor, the weight of all those memories pressed down on me, threatening to crush what little spirit I had left. I felt pathetic, worthless. Just as they saw me, I cried until I was empty, until my throat was raw and my head pounded with a dull ache. And in the hollowed-out silence that followed, a different feeling began to surface. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something colder, sharper. It was anger, a slow-burning rage against their judgment, against their casual cruelty. I had let them define me for my entire life. I had accepted their version of my story. No more. I pushed myself up, my legs shaky, and walked back to my desk. My face in the monitor's reflection was pale and blotchy, but my eyes held a new light, a dangerous glint. My fingers, still trembling slightly, moved to the keyboard. I opened a web browser, the cursor blinking on the clean white page, waiting. I thought about the phone plan, the invisible network that connected them all, the one I controlled, the one I paid for. An idea, wild and audacious, began to form. I typed 2 sentences into the search bar, the words appearing like a prophecy on the screen. How to start your own telecom company. And then, more specifically, how to start your own telecom MVNO, mobile virtual network operator, a company that doesn't own the network infrastructure, but buys access to it at a wholesale rate and resells it. It was a long shot, it was insane, but as I clicked search, and the first results began to load, I felt the shame spiral stop. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking down at the floor, I was looking up. The days that followed were a blur of obsessive research. I devoured articles, white papers, and forum posts about mobile virtual network operators. The more I learned, the more the insane idea began to feel possible. An MVNO was like being a digital landlord. You didn't have to build the skyscraper, you just leased the floors and rented them out. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. I was a tech person, a problem solver, but I knew nothing about business licensing, carrier negotiations, or corporate structuring. I needed a guide, a mentor who had walked this path before, so I began my campaign. I compiled a list of retired executives from the telecom industry, scouring old press releases and business archives. I drafted a cold email, a message I rewrote at least 100 times. It was direct, humble, and a little desperate. I explained my technical background and my ambition. I didn't ask for money or a job, I asked for knowledge. I offered to do any work they needed: data entry, transcribing old notes, organizing digital files, anything, in exchange for an hour of their time each week. I sent out 50 emails. The response was a deafening silence. A few bounced back with "address not found." Most were simply ignored. Digital messages in a bottle tossed into an indifferent ocean. I started to lose hope. My brief surge of anger-fueled motivation began to wane, replaced by the familiar gnaw of self-doubt. My mother's voice echoed in my head, "You'll never make it." Then, 2 weeks later, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender's name was just E. Linwood. The subject line was, "REM Mentorship Proposal." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew the name. Edra Linwood was a legend, a ghost. She had founded one of the most disruptive telecom companies of the 90s, built it into an empire, and then, at the height of her success, she had sold it for a fortune and vanished from public life completely. She was a recluse, a myth in the industry. I clicked open the email, my hand trembling. The message was brutally short, devoid of any pleasantries. "Your email was presumptuous. You have no track record. You have no capital. By all logical metrics, you will fail. However, your proposal was not stupid. You offered value instead of just asking for a handout. This is rare. I'll help. We will meet virtually. Once a week, you will be my personal archivist. You will digitize my old business journals. In return, I will answer your questions. But be warned, If you waste my time, if you ask foolish questions, if I sense for 1 second that you are not 100% committed, I'm done. We will never speak again. Do you agree to these terms? I felt a jolt of terror and exhilaration. This wasn't a friendly offer, it was a challenge, a test. I typed my reply with shaking fingers. Yes, I agree to your terms, thank you. The next 6 months were the most grueling and transformative of my life. Edra was as good as her word. She was a ghost CEO, a disembodied voice on a secure audio call, a formidable intellect on the other end of an encrypted chat. I never saw her face. Our sessions were intense, surgically precise. She would email me scanned pages from her old journals, decades of handwritten notes filled with business plans, negotiation tactics, and brutal self-assessments. My job was to transcribe and digitize them, organizing them into a searchable database. It was painstaking work, but it was like a private masterclass in building a business from the ground up. Then, once a week, we would talk. I would present my progress on the archives, and then she would grill me. You've read about my negotiation with Telcorp in '98. What was my leverage? What was their weakness? How would you adapt that strategy for today's market? Her questions were relentless. She picked apart my assumptions, exposed the flaws in my thinking, and forced me to defend my ideas with data and logic, not just enthusiasm. She taught me about the complex web of regulations, the art of drafting a business plan that investors would actually read, and the crucial, intricate dance of leasing network access from the giant carriers. She called it piggybacking. The big players have built the highways, she'd explained, her voice crisp and clear over the speaker. You are not building a new highway. You are building a better, smarter, more efficient fleet of cars to run on it. That is your niche. That is your strength. Never forget that. I worked tirelessly, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of purpose. I was still in my basement, but my world had expanded. Edra was harsh, demanding, and utterly unforgiving. But for the first time in my life, someone whose opinion I respected wasn't telling me I couldn't do something. She was showing me how. And under her invisible, exacting tutelage, the vague dream of revenge began to solidify into a viable, concrete plan. The ghost CEO was teaching me how to build an empire of my own. The first tangible piece of my new venture was the name. I thought about it for weeks, wanting something that was both personal and professional. In the end, the choice was simple, a quiet act of claiming my own space. Collinet. It felt right. It felt mine. Armed with Edra's guidance and a shoestring budget saved from my freelance work, I took the first real steps. I filed the paperwork to become an LLC. I built a simple, clean website. I negotiated my first wholesale agreement with a major carrier, a terrifying process that involved weeks of back-and-forth emails and calls where I used the exact phrasing and tactics Edra had drilled into me. The first product was a prepaid niche service, a no-frills, low-cost mobile plan designed for people like me, students, freelancers, and anyone else the big companies ignored. My bootstrap empire began not with a bang, but with a stack of flyers I designed myself and printed at the local library. I walked through college campuses, pinning them to bulletin boards in student unions and libraries. I spent hours on Reddit, finding subreddits for frugal living and student loans, and carefully, respectfully posted about my new affordable alternative. I wasn't just a CEO, I was the entire company. I was marketing, sales, and most exhaustingly, customer support. My personal cell phone became the Calinet helpline. The first call came at 2 a.m. from a panicked college student whose data had stopped working right before a major paper was due. I walked him through troubleshooting the APN settings on his phone, my heart pounding with the fear of failure. It turned out to be a simple fix, but it was a harsh lesson in the reality of being responsible for someone else's connection to the world. Mistakes were made. I misconfigured a batch of SIM cards, leading to a dozen customers having no service for a day. I sent out a billing reminder email with a typo in the company name. Each error felt like a catastrophe, a sign that my family was right, that I was in over my head. I'd collapse into bed exhausted and demoralized, only to be woken by another customer support call. But for every mistake, there was a small victory. The first 100 customers felt like a miracle. I knew them all by name. I celebrated the 500th customer by treating myself to a pizza that wasn't from the frozen food aisle. Then came a breakthrough. One of my early customers was the founder of a small local tech startup. He was impressed with my service and my hands-on support. He asked if I could provide a plan for his 12 employees, my first B2B client. I drafted a proposal, my hands shaking as I remembered my father laughing at my last one. This time, however, the proposal was accepted. The revenue from that single deal more than doubled my monthly income. I felt a surge of pride, so intense it almost brought me to tears. I was building something real. I shared the news with Edra during our next call, my voice buzzing with excitement. I expected praise, a rare acknowledgement of my progress. Instead, her response was a splash of cold water. "Good," she said, her tone flat. "Now the real work begins. You're at the most dangerous stage. You have a taste of success, and your instinct will be to chase it. You'll want to scale up, hire people, rent an office. Don't get cocky. Scale slow or sink fast. Every dollar you made on that B2B deal needs to go back into the infrastructure, not into your ego. Are we clear?" Her words stung, but I knew she was right. My tiny basement empire was fragile. It was built on late nights, cheap flyers, and sheer force of will. It could all come crashing down with one wrong move. So I took her advice. I reinvested everything. I upgraded my back-end systems. I bought a small, dedicated server. I stayed in the basement. The glamour could wait. The work could not. My life was a relentless grind, but for the first time, it was a grind with a purpose. Every new customer, every solved problem, every dollar earned was a brick in the foundation of Calinet, and a chip out of the foundation of the family that had left me behind. The spring bled into summer, a season I barely noticed from the perpetual twilight of my basement. My world was my work. Then, one evening in early June, the outside world intruded. It was Sheridan's birthday. I only knew because I saw the pictures. They flooded my social media feeds, a curated gallery of forced happiness. The whole family was there, gathered at an absurdly fancy restaurant downtown, the kind with white tablecloths and entrees that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. There was Sheridan, holding a champagne flute, the center of her own universe. There was Brant, clapping a beaming Cooper on the back. There were my parents, looking on with incandescent pride. I wasn't invited. I hadn't expected to be. The sting of rejection was dull now, a familiar ache rather than a sharp pain. I was an outsider, a ghost. But as I scrolled through the photos, my clinical curiosity overtook my hurt. I zoomed in on one particular picture, a wide shot of the table. And there they were, lying next to the breadbasket, beside the wine glasses, were their phones. A sleek iPhone for Sheridan, a new Android for Brant, my mother's familiar rose gold case. And I recognized them. Not just the devices, but what they represented. I swiveled in my chair and pulled up the Calinet admin dashboard on one of my monitors. Then, I logged into the old family plan account, the one I still foolishly paid for. I cross-referenced the device identification numbers. There it was. Line 2, Sheridan Huxley. Line 3, Brant Huxley. Line 1, Donna Huxley. All active. All currently using data, probably to upload the very photos I was looking at. They were celebrating a life I wasn't part of, using a service I provided, without a single thought, without a shred of gratitude. A cold, hard anger began to build in my chest. It was a quiet, clean anger, not the hot, messy shame I used to feel. It was the anger of a CEO, looking at a balance sheet and seeing a liability. I kept scrolling through the photos. Then I saw it. A video, posted by Cooper. It was shaky, obviously filmed on his phone. The whole table was raising their glasses. Cooper's voice, loud and slurring slightly, rose above the restaurant's din. "A toast," he shouted. "To my beautiful fiancé Sheridan, and to people who actually do something with their lives, who build things, who aren't afraid to be successful." The table erupted in cheers and laughter. My father raised his glass the highest. Brant gave a loud "hear, hear." I watched the video 3 times. to people who actually do something with their lives. The words were a direct hit, a cruise missile aimed at my basement. They weren't just toasting Sheridan, they were toasting themselves, their entire worldview. A world where I, the quiet girl in the basement, the one playing with gadgets, didn't count. A world where my work, my struggle, my nascent success was invisible and therefore meaningless. That was the moment everything crystallized. The hurt, the anger, the years of feeling invisible, it all coalesced into a single sharp point of resolve. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It wasn't about hurt feelings. I looked from the laughing faces on my screen to the Calinet logo on my other monitor. I looked at the family plan billing page, my name still listed as the responsible party. This was business. They had drawn a line in the sand, and they had no idea that I was the one who owned the beach. This was war. And it was a war I was finally equipped to win. The B2B deal had given me confidence, perhaps too much. Edra's warning about not getting cocky echoed in my mind, but the desire to grow, to prove everyone wrong, was a powerful intoxicant. I decided it was time to seek professional funding. I spent a month polishing my business plan, creating slide decks, and running financial projections until my eyes burned. I secured a meeting with a small local venture capital fund. I put on my one good blazer, a purchase that felt both extravagant and necessary, and walked into their sleek, minimalist office, feeling like an imposter. The meeting was a disaster. 3 men in identical gray suits sat across a vast marble table, their faces impassive. I talked about my niche market, my lean operational model, my steady growth. They listened with polite disinterest, their eyes occasionally flicking down to their smartwatches. When I finished, the one in the middle, the clear alpha, leaned back in his chair. "It's a cute idea, Calla," he said, the word cute landing like a punch. "A nice little lifestyle business, but it's not scalable. You're competing with giants. What's your moat? What's your unfair advantage?" I tried to explain that my advantage was my low overhead, my direct customer relationship. He just smiled a bloodless smile. "We're looking for unicorns, not ponies. Thanks for coming in." The rejection email was in my inbox before I even got back to the subway. The corporate jargon was a polite mask for what they really thought. I was too small, too female, too unproven. Defeated but not yet broken, I decided to pivot. If the suits wouldn't listen, I'd go directly to the people. I scraped together a few $100s and launched a Facebook ad campaign. I targeted users interested in tech, budget-friendly living, and small businesses. I created what I thought were clever ads, highlighting Calinet's affordability and personal touch. The ads bombed. My click-through rate was abysmal. My cost per acquisition was astronomical. I had spent nearly $1,000 to gain exactly 3 new customers. I sat in my basement, staring at the bleak analytics report on my screen, and for the first time since starting Calinet, I seriously considered quitting. The shame spiral threatened to pull me back under. My mother's voice was there, whispering, "You'll never make it." Brant's laughter echoed in the quiet room. The VC's words, "a cute little lifestyle business," replayed in my head. Maybe they were all right. Maybe I was just a girl in a basement playing with gadgets, deluding herself into thinking she could build an empire. I scheduled a call with Edra, my voice heavy with defeat. I laid it all out for her. The rejection, the failed ad campaign, the crushing self-doubt. I half expected her to say, "I told you so," or to finally enact her threat and cut me off for wasting her time. Instead, she was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm, not sympathetic. "Good," she said. "Now you know what doesn't work. Real founders don't succeed because they never fail. They succeed because they fail forward. They learn from the hit, they adjust their stance, and they get back in the fight." Did you learn anything from the VC meeting? I thought about it. "They think I'm too small," I said. "They don't see my lean model as an advantage." "And the ads?" she pressed. "I learned that broad targeting is like throwing spaghetti at a wall," I admitted. "I wasted money trying to talk to everyone instead of talking to the right people." "Exactly," Edra said. "These are not failures. These are expensive lessons. Your problem isn't your business model, it's your pride. You're still trying to prove something to people who don't matter. Stop trying to look like a unicorn. Be a cockroach. Survive. Grow where they aren't looking. Her tough love advice shocked me out of my stupor. She was right. I had been so focused on getting external validation that I'd lost sight of my core mission. I needed to be a cockroach. I scrapped the idea of big funding and went back to basics. I thought about who my best customers were. They were people who valued what I offered: reliability and personal service. Then a thought struck me. I pulled up my old freelance client list, the people I'd helped with their tech problems long before Calinet existed. One name stood out: an older gentleman, a retired engineer for whom I'd recovered a lifetime of lost family photos from a corrupted hard drive. He had been so grateful, he'd sent me a check for 5 times my quoted fee. On a whim, I drafted an email. I didn't ask for money, I just sent him a brief update on what I was building, a 1-page summary of Calinet. I told him how his past generosity had helped me get started. I ended it by saying, I just wanted to share my journey with someone who believed in me. I hit send and forgot about it. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was him. Calla, he said, his voice warm and familiar. I read your summary. This isn't a cute little business. This is essential, and I don't invest in business plans. I invest in people, and I believe in you. The next morning, I received a notification from my bank, a wire transfer, for $40,000. I stared at the number, at the string of zeros, and I started to cry, but this time, they were not tears of shame. They were tears of overwhelming, world-altering gratitude. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was enough to build the infrastructure for 5,000 lines. It was enough to stop being a cockroach. It was enough to start becoming a dragon. The $40,000 sat in my business account like a sleeping giant. It was a safety net, a war chest, and a constant terrifying responsibility. Every decision I made was now magnified. Edra's voice was a permanent fixture in my head: scale slow or sink fast. I invested methodically, purchasing server space, upgrading my billing software, and securing a more robust wholesale data agreement with my carrier partner. Calinet was growing stronger, more resilient, all in the quiet shadows of my basement. Then an official-looking envelope arrived in the mail. It was from the phone company, the one that still held the Huxley family plan. I felt a prickle of annoyance, assuming it was just another bill I'd have to pay. But it was a notification of a change to the account. I scanned the document, my eyes narrowing. Brant had added a 5th line to the plan. He had walked into a store, invoked the account name, and signed up his wife Jenna's sister, without ever speaking to me. No call, no text, no email, just the casual, breathtaking entitlement of a man who had never had to pay a bill in his life. The audacity of it was a slap in the face. It was the final piece of evidence I needed that, to them, I wasn't a person, I was a utility, a free, invisible service they could exploit at will. My first instinct was pure, white-hot rage. I wanted to log in right then and there and suspend the entire account. I wanted to imagine their phones going dark mid-text, the smug confidence draining from their faces as they saw the no-signal icon appear. My finger hovered over the button on the admin screen. But then, another voice cut through the anger. Edra's, wait, time it. Revenge is a dish best served cold, Calla. And strategically, she was right. A sudden, unexplained outage would be an inconvenience they'd blame on the carrier. They would call customer service, complain, and eventually, the problem would be fixed. My role would remain invisible. To make this count, it couldn't just be an outage, it had to be a statement. It had to be undeniable. A new plan began to form, more intricate, and far more satisfying than simply pulling the plug. I had the money. I had the infrastructure. I could do more than just shut their service down. I could take it over. For the next 2 weeks, I worked with a quiet, focused intensity. I initiated a porting request for the 5 phone numbers on the Huxley family plan. Porting is the process of moving a phone number from one carrier to another. As the official account holder, I had the authority to do it. On the forms, I listed the new carrier as Calinet Wireless. It was a painstaking, delicate process. I had to ensure the transition would be seamless, with no interruption in their service. They couldn't know anything had changed. On the day the port was scheduled to complete, I watched the dashboard with the intensity of a surgeon monitoring a patient's vitals. At 3:15 p.m., it happened. 5 numbers, 5 familiar names, populated my Calinet admin screen: Sheridan, Brandt, Donna, Vance, Cooper. They were mine now. I controlled their connection to the world, running it through my own servers, on my own platform. A wave of profound, terrifying power washed over me. I had cut the strings connecting them to the old carrier and attached them to me, their silent puppet master. They had no idea. Their phones worked just as they had before. But now, I was the one pulling the strings. A week later, an email landed in my inbox. The sender was my mother. The subject line: Christmas. My blood ran cold. I opened it. It was a cutesy generic invitation to the annual family Christmas dinner. But at the bottom, there was a personal note addressed to me. Kala, dear. It read, Sheridan was hoping you could come this year, and could you bring your good camera? You're so techie, and we need someone to take nice photos of the whole family for the wedding album. It would be such a big help. I read the last sentence 3 times. Not we'd love to see you. Not it wouldn't be the same without you. But we need someone to take photos. I was being summoned, not as a daughter or a sister, but as unpaid event staff. They were inviting the help. I looked from the condescending email to my Colinet dashboard, where their names glowed on my screen. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the perfect trap, and they had just invited me to spring it. Of course, I typed back. I'd be happy to come. The week leading up to Christmas was my pregame. The nervous energy that used to manifest as anxiety now channeled itself into meticulous preparation. This wasn't just a family dinner. It was a product launch, a hostile takeover, and a closing argument all rolled into one. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked girl in the basement. I was the founder and CEO of Calinet Wireless, and I was going to dress the part. My old blazer wouldn't do. I took a small portion of my earnings and bought a new outfit. It wasn't flashy, but it was professional: a well-tailored pair of black trousers, a sharp silk blouse, and a structured blazer that made me feel like I had armor on. It was a costume, and the role I was playing was woman in charge. Next, I focused on the props. I went online and designed a new business card. The cardstock was thick, the font clean and modern. In the center, in stark, simple text, it read, Calla Huxley, founder and CEO, Calinet Wireless. I ordered a box of 500. Holding the first one in my hand felt more significant than holding my high school diploma ever had. It was real. It was earned. Then, I made a bolder move. I called a friend, another freelance tech, a guy named Marcus, whom I often collaborated with on projects. Marcus, I said, I have a strange gig for you. I need you to come with me to a family event. I need you to act as my assistant. He was confused. Your assistant? Kala, what's going on? It's a strategic operation, I explained, a hint of a smile in my voice. You don't have to do much. Just carry a briefcase, look professional, and defer to me if anyone asks you a question. I'll pay you your full hourly rate. He laughed. This sounds way more interesting than debugging code. I'm in. Should I call you Ms. Huxley? Kala is fine, I said, but Ms. Huxley has a certain ring to it. The final piece of my plan involved a call to a man I hadn't spoken to in years, Mr. Stanford, the old family lawyer. He was a neutral observer, a man who had handled my grandfather's will and had seen firsthand the dynamics of my family for decades. I knew he had a soft spot for me, always treating me with a quiet respect that the rest of my family lacked. Mr. Stanford, I said when he answered, it's Kala Huxley. I need to retain your services for a business matter. It involves a contract and asset registration, and I need you to deliver the documentation in person, at my parents' house, on Christmas Day, at 8:15 p.m. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his wise old head. Kala, he said finally, his voice laced with curiosity. This sounds highly unusual. It is, I confirmed, but it's also highly necessary. He sighed, a sound of weary amusement. I'll be there. My firm will bill your company directly, I assume? Yes, I said. the words feeling solid and real in my mouth. Bill Collinet Wireless. The night before the dinner, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a feeling who it was. "You're ready for this?" Edra's voice asked, no preamble. "I think so," I said, looking at my reflection in the dark monitor. The woman looking back was someone I was just getting to know. "Don't think." "No," she commanded. "You have the leverage. You have the truth on your side, but they will try to make it about emotion. They'll cry, they'll yell, they'll try to make you feel guilty. Don't let them. This is a business transaction. Remember the most important rule: make them ask. You don't brag, you don't announce, you let them walk right into it. Let the truth shock them. The silence after the bomb drops is where you win." I took a deep breath. "Make them ask," I repeated. "Let the truth shock them." A genuine smile touched my lips, not one of bitterness or revenge, but of pure, unadulterated confidence. I was ready. The quiet girl was done being quiet. The crunch of snow under my boots sounded unnaturally loud as I walked up the stone path to my parents' house. The place was lit up like a beacon, glowing with a warmth that had never felt like it was for me. Marcus, looking surprisingly sharp in a dark suit, walked beside me, carrying a leather briefcase. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, her face a mask of festive cheer that faltered for a second when she saw me. Then it faltered even more when she saw Marcus. "Kala, you're here," she said, her eyes flicking from me to him, "and you've brought a friend." "Mom, this is my colleague, Marcus," I said, my voice even and calm. "Marcus, this is my mother, Donna." Marcus nodded politely. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Huxley." The use of colleague and the formal handshake threw her off. I was no longer just Kala. I was Kala and her colleague. We stepped inside, into the familiar smell of pine needles and roasting turkey. Everyone was in the living room. Sheridan shot me a look, a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Kala, you made it," she said, her tone implying I had just crawled out from under a rock. "Who's this?" "My assistant, Marcus," I replied smoothly, enjoying the subtle shift in her expression. The word assistant hung in the air, a concept they couldn't reconcile with their image of me. Brant, ever the alpha, walked over and gave Marcus a condescending up and down look. "Assistant, huh? You still freelancing from that basement, Kala?" "Something like that," I said with a small, enigmatic smile. I didn't elaborate. I just let the question hang there. I could feel their eyes on me as I took a seat, not hiding in a corner, but choosing a central armchair. I noticed them all, one by one, glance down at their phones, texting, scrolling, posting. The signal was strong. The service was flawless. Collinet was working perfectly. I just nodded, smiled, and waited. The dinner was the usual performance. My father told the same old stories. Sheridan talked endlessly about wedding venues. Brant bragged about a deal he'd closed. I remained mostly silent, a calm observer in the center of the storm. I answered their perfunctory questions with brief, non-committal answers. My quietness, which they used to see as weakness, now seemed to unnerve them. It was the quiet of someone who knew something they didn't. At exactly 8 p.m., my watch vibrated silently against my wrist. It was time. Excusing myself from the table, I went to the guest bathroom. I took out my phone, my heart beating a steady, powerful rhythm. I opened the Calinet admin app. I navigated to the Huxley group I had created. 5 lines, all active. I took a deep breath and pressed the suspend account button. A confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure you want to suspend all services for this group?" I pressed conform. On my screen, the 5 green active indicators turned to red. Suspended. It was done. I walked back into the dining room just as Sheridan's fiancé Cooper was getting to his feet, glass in hand, for another self-congratulatory toast. "I just want to say," he began, his voice booming, "how wonderful it is to be part of a family that truly values success, that—" He stopped mid-sentence. He frowned and tapped the screen of his phone, which he'd been reading his toast from. "Huh. That's weird." He swiped at the screen, his confident smirk faltering. Sheridan looked at him, annoyed. "What is it, Coop?" My phone just froze, he said, shaking it as if that would help. I have no signal. Sheridan rolled her eyes and picked up her own phone. Let me see. She tapped the screen. Her expression mirrored his. Confusion, then irritation. Mine too, she said, her voice sharp. What the hell? I have nothing. One by one, like a chain reaction of dominoes, they all reached for their devices. My father. My mother. Brant. My data is gone, Brant said, a note of panic in his voice. I can't even get my email. Vance, what's going on? My mother asked, her voice trembling slightly. Did you pay the Wi-Fi bill? The panic was palpable now, a frantic, nervous energy zipping around the table. They looked at their useless dark screens like they were seeing a ghost. I just sat there, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I said nothing. I just watched them. I waited for them to ask. The festive atmosphere in the room had evaporated, replaced by a thick, anxious silence. My family stared at their inert phones as if they were alien artifacts. The sudden disconnection from their digital world had left them looking bewildered and helpless. It must be a network outage, my father Vance declared, trying to project an authority he didn't feel. A big one, to take out everyone's service at once. Brant scoffed. On Christmas? No way. This is ridiculous. I need to get online for a work thing. He jabbed at his phone screen with increasing frustration. Sheridan looked like she was about to cry. My whole wedding planning board is on my phone. All my vendor contacts. It was my mother who finally turned her panicked gaze on me. It was the look she always gave me when the television remote had dead batteries or the printer wouldn't work. Kala, she said, her voice a mixture of hope and command. You're good with this stuff. What's wrong? Can you fix it? And there it was, the question I had been waiting for. I placed my water glass down gently on the table. The small sound seemed to echo in the silent room. There's nothing to fix, I said, my voice calm and clear. There's no outage. They all stared at me. What do you mean? Brant demanded. Of course there's an outage. None of our phones work. Your phones don't work, I corrected gently, because the account they're on has been suspended. A wave of confusion washed over their faces. Suspended? By who? My father asked. The carrier wouldn't just do that. No, I agreed. The carrier wouldn't, but the account owner would. Just then the doorbell rang. The sound made everyone jump. My mother, looking flustered, went to answer it. A moment later she returned, followed by Mr. Stanford, the family lawyer. He was dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a leather folio. He looked calm, professional, and completely out of place at a Christmas dinner. Mr. Stanford, my father said, standing up, his confusion deepening. What on earth are you doing here? Good evening, Vance. Donna, Mr. Stanford said, his gaze sweeping over the room before landing on me with a subtle nod. I'm here at the request of my client. He looked directly at me. Miss Calla Huxley. The room went dead silent. The name Miss Calla Huxley coming from the family lawyer was a sonic boom they had not been prepared for. Sheridan gasped. Brant's face, which had been red with frustration, began to turn a pale, chalky white. Mr. Stanford opened his folio. I'm here to deliver some official documentation, he announced to the room. Due to recent changes in asset registration, the corporate telecom account servicing the numbers at this residence has been formally transferred. It is now registered as a business account, under the full legal ownership and control of the company Calanet Wireless. He paused, letting the name sink in. The founder and CEO of which, he added, with perfect timing, is Miss Calla Huxley. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. I met their gazes, one by one. Sheridan's look of disbelief, Brant's dawning horror, my parents' utter, slack-jawed shock. The mask of the quiet, helpful basement-dwelling failure fell away. In its place was a woman they didn't recognize. A woman who owned them. I let the silence stretch out, savoring the moment Idra had told me to wait for. The moment the bomb dropped. Finally, I spoke, my voice devoid of anger or triumph, filled only with simple, irrefutable fact. I set up the plan years ago. I've paid every single bill for it, for every single one of your phones, for almost a decade. I paid for the calls you made, the texts you sent, and the photos you posted. I paid for everything. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locking with my father's. So now, I said, the words landing with the weight of absolute authority, I decide who gets service. The shock on their faces was more satisfying than any revenge I had ever imagined. They were speechless, utterly, completely speechless. Their world, for a moment, had stopped, and I was the one who had stopped it. The silence in the room was a fragile thing, and Sheridan was the one to shatter it. Her shock curdled into a desperate, pleading whine. "Kala, what is this? A joke?" "This isn't funny," she stammered, her eyes wide. "Turn our phones back on. I need my phone." "It's not a joke, Sheridan," I said, my voice remaining level. "It's a business decision." Brant shot to his feet, his face mottled with rage. "You can't do this. That's our family plan." "No, Brant," I corrected him calmly. "It was my plan. You were just on it. And Colinet Wireless is my company. You threatened to sue me. For what? Discontinuing a service I was providing for free?" He deflated, sputtering, the threat dying on his lips as the legal reality of the situation, underscored by Mr. Stanford's presence, began to sink in. My mother, Donna, resorted to her time-honored tactic: tears. "Kala, honey, how could you do this to us? To your family? On Christmas?" The emotional manipulation that had worked on me my entire life now felt hollow, pathetic. "The same way you could sit me at a children's table at age 29, I replied, my voice cold. "The same way you could kick me out of the family group chat without a word. This isn't about family, it's about a history of disrespect." Then, a new voice entered the fray. It was Jenna, Brant's wife, the silent enabler. She had been sitting motionless, her hands clasped in her lap. Now she looked up, and for the first time, she wasn't looking at her plate. She was looking directly at Brant, at Sheridan, at my parents. "She's right," Jenna said, her voice quiet, but ringing with a newfound strength that startled everyone. "She's absolutely right. You all used her, for years. You mocked her work, you dismissed her, you took her money and never said thank you. She built something real, something better than any of us have ever built, and you were too arrogant to even see it." Brant turned on her, his eyes blazing. "Jenna, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," she said, standing up. "I know everything." The final devastating blow came not from me, but from Mr. Stanford. He cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention again. "There is one more piece of business," he said, consulting his papers. "My client, Ms. Huxley, has also been named the primary successor to the holdings of the Linwood Strategic Investment Trust." He looked up. "For those of you unfamiliar, that is the private fund established by Ms. Edra Linwood." The name Linwood, a titan in the telecom world, hung in the air. My father, who followed business news, paled even further. This wasn't just about a family phone plan anymore. I wasn't just some disgruntled daughter. I was a player, a successor to a legend. The power dynamic in the room didn't just shift, it shattered and reformed around me. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out two small envelopes. I walked over to the table and placed one in front of Jenna. "This is a new SIM card," I said to her quietly, "for a private account on my network. It's already paid for the first year." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. She nodded, unable to speak. I then walked over to Mr. Stanford and handed him the second envelope. "And one for you, Mr. Stanford, as a retainer." He accepted it with a thin, appreciative smile. I turned back to my family. Sheridan was frozen, her face a mask of horrified realization. Brant looked like he'd been punched in the gut. My parents simply stared, lost and confused. Their phones were dead, their faces were pale, their connection to the world I now commanded was severed. Their perfect golden world had just gone dark, and I was the one who had flipped the switch. Leaving the suffocating silence of the dining room was like surfacing for air. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. Marcus was waiting for me in the hall, and as I walked past him, I gave a small nod. He fell into step behind me. I opened the front door and stepped out into the crisp, cold night. The snow was falling gently, each flake a tiny, perfect crystal, muffling the world in a blanket of clean, quiet white. The air tasted of freedom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a call from a blocked number. I answered it. "You did it," Edra's voice said. It wasn't a question. "I did," I confirmed, a real smile spreading across my face. It wasn't a smile of victory or revenge. It was a smile of peace, of release. "How do you feel?" she asked. I looked back at the house, a warm, golden box filled with the cold ashes of my old life. "I feel seen," I said. "Finally." "Good," she said, and for the first time, I heard something that sounded almost like warmth in her voice. "Welcome to the game, Kala. Now the real work begins." She hung up. I stood there for a moment, just breathing in the cold air. Marcus came and stood beside me, not speaking, just offering a silent, supportive presence. I opened my messaging app. There it was. The ghost of the Huxley family group chat, grayed out and inactive. I pressed and held the icon. A menu popped up. My thumb hovered over the words delete chat. For a second, a flicker of something, nostalgia, obligation, a lifetime of conditioning made me hesitate. Then I thought of the kids' table, of Sheridan's condescending voice, of Brant's laughter, of the words "we need someone to take photos." I pressed delete. It vanished from my screen as if it had never existed. The digital tether was cut. Then I tapped the new chat icon. I added 3 people, Edra, Marcus, and Jenna. I typed a name for the group, Calanet Core Team. It was small, but it was strong, and it was mine. I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need their approval. I had spent so long trying to earn a seat at their table. I had never realized I could just build my own. My company was small, yes, but it was mine. My team was tiny, but they were loyal, and that feeling, the quiet, solid confidence of knowing you have built something real, something of your own, was the only signal I needed. The win wasn't about shutting them down, it was about building myself up. 6 months later, the world had changed. The basement was no longer my entire universe. I still worked there, but now it felt less like a dungeon and more like a command center. Calanet was growing, slowly and steadily, just as Edra had advised. We had crossed the threshold of 3,000 active users. The cockroach was surviving, and it was thriving in the cracks the giants ignored. The validation I had once craved from my family now came from other, more meaningful sources. A feature article appeared in a popular online tech magazine, titled "The Microcarrier Revolution: How Calanet is Winning by Staying Small." The journalist had been fascinated by my story, by the bootstrap ethos of the company. Seeing my name and the Calanet logo in print felt surreal, a confirmation that my reality had expanded beyond my own 4 walls. My team, which now included Marcus full-time and 2 part-time customer service reps I'd hired from a local college, threw me a surprise birthday party. They filled my small apartment with balloons and presented me with a cake that had the Calanet logo piped on it in frosting. As I looked around at their smiling faces, at the genuine affection and respect in their eyes, I felt a warmth that the Huxley Christmas dinner had never provided. This was my circle now. This was my team. The break from my biological family had been clean and absolute. I'd received a few frantic, rambling voicemails in the days after Christmas, oscillating between threats and tearful apologies, but I never responded. Eventually they stopped. The silence was a relief. The only connection I maintained was with Jenna. She had left Brant a week after that fateful dinner. Calanet had been more than just a free phone plan for her. It had been an escape hatch. She texted me privately one afternoon. "Just wanted to say thank you again, Kala. Not just for the phone, for showing me that there was a door. I'm on my own now. I have my own apartment. I feel free." I smiled as I read the message. My act of self-preservation had inadvertently liberated someone else. That felt like a victory far greater than simply shutting off their service. It was a ripple effect of empowerment. Later that evening, I was walking home from a meeting, my first successful pitch to a small chain of local coffee shops to provide their corporate lines. The city lights blurred around me. I glanced down at my phone. At the top of the screen, next to the Calanet network name, were 5 solid bars of signal. Full bars. I put my hand over my heart, feeling its steady, even beat. Full heart. The thought came to me then, clear and simple. Family isn't blood. It's not about who you're born to, or the name you share. It's about who shows up. It's about who listens. It's about who believes in you when you're in the basement, and who celebrates with you when you reach the penthouse. Family is who stays connected, not by a shared bill, but by a shared respect. And for the first time in my life, I had a family I could count on. I had found the signal that truly mattered. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? What would you do if they finally needed you? Let me know in the comments. If you loved this story of silent success and sweet revenge, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life inspired stories like this. This is Kala's story, but it could be yours too. Stay sharp, stay silent, then strike.